I have high expectations for you. After all, you were the top seller at the previous branch. Kevin Owen, the branch manager, smirked and kept making snide remarks. Of course, you'll surpass my sales in no time. It was my first day at this branch, and my first time meeting the branch manager. Yet, right from the start, he directed hostility towards me, leaving me more confused than angry. My name is Nathan Simpson. I had been working at a local dealership of a major car company, in a small town of about 50,000 people. The store's sales were decent. We mainly made profits from car repairs and maintenance. At that store, I set a new sales record. The number of customers in the countryside is limited. The total sales might not seem impressive, but I pride myself on my high contract success rate. I always made sure to explain the benefits of the cars and buying from our store to the customers thoroughly. I was good at sales talk. That was the first thing I was asked about at the new store. How do you manage to be so good at sales? It's my dad's influence. He's always been all about cars. My talk is just imitating my dad. Influenced by my father, I grew to love cars and pursued this career. I just convey the appeal of cars with all my might. You really love cars, don't you? At that moment, a sharp voice cut in. Hey, how long are you going to keep chatting? The branch manager scolded us with a sudden grumpiness. I'm sorry. The employees quickly returned to their duties. On my first day, I was unsure what I should be doing. As I looked around, I caught the branch manager's eye. There's nothing I need to teach an excellent employee like you, so just go ahead on your own. The branch manager said that, pushing me away. Meanwhile, with a disturbing smile, he added, I'm counting on you. After all, you were the top seller at the previous branch. And walked back to his desk. That was my first encounter with the branch manager Owen. I remember feeling disappointed by how twisted his personality seemed. Half a year later, I had been improving my performance, but the evaluation from the branch manager was still low. Here, the customer traffic was 5 times that of the previous store, and he argued that I should achieve 5 times the results. However, time doesn't multiply by 5. The time I can spend with each customer remains the same. Another complaint was that I could no longer commute by car. Life here was more convenient by train. On this day, as usual, I took the train at the same time and got off at the usual station. The only difference was that an elderly man lost his balance on the stairs. He was walking in front of me. During the busy commuting time, his slow pace caused a businessman rushing from behind to bump into him, tangling his feet. He managed to regain his balance by grabbing the handrail, but he exclaimed, "Ouch!" and held his back, unable to move. "Are you okay?" I hurried over. However, the pain seemed severe, and the old man couldn't speak, his face contorted in a grimace. "Please hold on to me." I offered my hand, but the elderly man barely managed to stand, unable to reach out his hand. I turned my back to him and crouched down. "I'll carry you to the station office." The elderly man wobbled and grabbed my shoulder. I supported his body firmly and slowly stood up. "I'm sorry." The old man strained his voice to apologize. "It's okay." I proceeded gently. The elderly man seemed to feel a bit better lying on the sofa in the station office. "It might be a slipped disc." "I've had it before." "I've had it before too." "It's really painful." "It's the first time someone's carried me like this." The old man seemed a bit embarrassed. "It reminds me of my son." "Your son?" "I used to carry him a lot back in the days," he said, looking distant. "They must have been a close father and son. Maybe he's independent and not around anymore." I continued talking while keeping an eye on the elderly man, who seemed to have calmed down quite a bit. He said he had called for someone to pick him up, so he should be fine. I left him in the care of the station staff and was about to head to work. I had a car delivery scheduled today. I couldn't afford to be late. "Take care." As I was about to leave the station office, the old man called out from behind. "I'd like to thank you today. Could you give me your contact information?" No need for thanks. I won't be satisfied until I do. I thought for a moment and handed him my business card. Then, if you'd like, please visit our store. I hadn't expected him to buy a car because of this, but prospecting is an important part of the job. I left the station and immediately called the branch. It looked like I was going to be just on time for the delivery. The branch manager answered the phone. When I told him, he started getting irritated. You might be late. What if that ruins the customer's mood? I explained the reason, but the branch manager wasn't listening. Your sales performance is poor, and you can't even take care of customers. How mediocre can you get? The delivery was for a long-time customer the branch manager was also familiar with. Are you trying to ruin my reputation? People from country stores really lack ideas. I can make it if I hurry. I said that and hung up the phone. I thought about arguing back, but it would be a waste of time. After working together for half a year, the branch manager still regarded me as an enemy. On that day, I managed to make the delivery on time and return to the store. However, an infuriated the branch manager was waiting for me. I was summoned to an empty meeting room and lectured incessantly. You were lucky this time, but don't get cocky. Just because you sell cars doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. I was fed up. The branch manager wouldn't listen to my side, and my dissatisfaction only grew. Why do you look so dissatisfied? We don't need a careless person like you in this store. I'll transfer you out and end this quickly. The branch manager said this with a sneer. Even though he was the branch manager, I thought it wouldn't be so easy to transfer me, but anxiety slowly crept in. The next day, the elderly man I had helped at the station really came to the branch. He was using a cane, but his back didn't seem too bad. As I was surprised and about to greet him, an older employee greeted him before me. Welcome, Mr. Anderson. Ah, Tony. It's been a while. Apparently, the elderly man, referred to as Mr. Anderson, had been a customer of this store for a long time. Mr. Anderson, the store's eldest patron, greeted Tony cheerfully. Tony was a competent person respected even by the branch manager. They happily exchanged updates. After finishing his chat with Tony, Mr. Anderson walked straight towards me. Thanks for your help yesterday. Are you able to walk okay now? It seems I just twisted it a bit. It hurts, but it's nothing serious. I'm glad it's not a slipped disc. He nodded with a smile. So you knew this store, Mr. Anderson? We've been associated for over 10 years. Mr. Anderson looked around the store. That was when the branch manager came out from the back. The moment their eyes met, his movement halted, but he soon put on a sales smile and approached us. Mr. Anderson, it's unusual for you to come without contacting us first. Although he was smiling, his tone was cold. It was unusual for the normally affable the branch manager to act like this, but Mr. Anderson didn't seem bothered. I'm not here as your customer today. He glanced at me and smiled. I'm thinking of buying a car from him. What? The one who panicked was the branch manager. Forgive me, but I have a long-standing relationship with you, Mr. Anderson. It would be problematic if there were any mishaps with someone else. Especially since he is a man who was late for an important delivery time. The branch manager piled on the words, criticizing me. However, Mr. Anderson was unfazed. Did you even ask why he was late? Whatever the reason, late is late. As they spoke, Mr. Anderson's mood visibly soured. He then thumped his cane on the floor with a loud noise. That's enough. I had faith in you until now, but it's pitiful how you demean your own staff. I'm canceling all the corporate car purchases I ordered the other day. Cancel. The branch manager, forgetting his position, raised his voice. Do you think you can do that? We have a contract. I have no intention of breaching the contract. I'm just canceling the arrangement with you. I will buy the cars from this Nathan here. Saying that, he glanced at me. The store suddenly buzzed with whispers. All canceled must mean more than just 1 or 2 vehicles. Amid the staff's agitation, Mr. Anderson spoke to me in a calm voice. So, you'll be my representative from now on. How about we start by having a meal together to deepen our acquaintance? Mr. Anderson beckoned me. But I still have work. As I glanced at the branch manager, Tony intervened. Entertaining clients is an important part of the job too. Tony. I thanked Tony and followed Mr. Anderson. A black luxury car with a chauffeur awaited outside. Later I learned that Mr. Anderson was the president of a transportation company. Take us to the usual place. Mr. Anderson instructed the driver as he ushered me into the car. We arrived at a bar. I used to drink a lot at places like this when I was younger. It's the perfect spot for reminiscing. He ordered beer, and I did the same. We toasted, and then Mr. Anderson suddenly began recounting the past. I have a son. But we got divorced when he was young, and we became estranged. Mr. Anderson was a workaholic and had seldom paid attention to his family. He had only a few memories of playing with his son, and the gap between them had deepened. Now, he regretted it a great deal. Back then, I had just started my company and had no leeway. I was so focused on work that I neglected my family. One day, when Mr. Anderson returned home, it was completely empty. I saw the empty house and for the first time realized what I had done. I still feel sorry about it. Have you not met your wife and son at all? While asking Mr. Anderson, I thought of my own father back home. Ever since becoming a working adult, I had hardly returned home. I meet my son occasionally. But he still resents me. Mr. Anderson looked lonely. I was ready to do anything to atone for my past mistakes. But every time that guy sees me, he glares at me coldly. The gap between father and son seemed very deep. I took a sip of beer and shared my thoughts. Please don't call your son that guy. It would hurt if my father called me that. Mr. Anderson's eyes widened as he looked at me. Perhaps, yes, perhaps I've been trying to apologize to my son without truly considering his feelings. Mr. Anderson slowly sipped his drink. I'm glad we had this talk. While it may seem a bit abrupt, there's another favor I'd like to ask of you. What is it? The story Mr. Anderson shared next was quite shocking. Half a month later, I was discussing a new sales initiative with the branch manager. Mr. Anderson had indeed appointed me as his representative, purchasing 10 company cars. This significantly widened the rift with the branch manager, but it seemed he couldn't just transfer me out after I had sold 10 new cars in one go. Normally, we hardly spoke, but when it came to work, it was a different story. Branch manager, there's a customer who wants to test drive the new car, and they'd like to use that specific drive course. The mentioned drive course was a toll road cut through the mountains, a bit away from here. Such an unreasonable request can't be accommodated. But the customer mentioned they would buy 2 cars at once if they liked them. The customer had shown interest in the most premium car our dealership offers. The branch manager crossed his arms and pondered for a while. All right. I'll accompany you. That will allow us to permit the test drive. Thank you. On the day of the appointment, we headed to the drive course in the test car. We had arranged to meet the customer near the summit at a rest area. He had arrived there before us. You're late. Mr. Anderson, you're just too early. Watching us converse familiarly, the branch manager was stunned. Why is Mr. Anderson here? I hesitantly replied to the branch manager. I know about both of your situations. You don't need to call him Mr. Anderson here. Hearing my words, the branch manager glared at Mr. Anderson. Did you tell him? I thought it was time we faced each other properly. I asked for his help. The branch manager then glared at me, his face almost seeming to grind his teeth, but he said nothing to me and turned back to Mr. Anderson. I have nothing to talk to you about. I may not for you, but I do. You abandoned us. You have no right to say that. It was a cry from the branch manager's heart. It was the first time I had heard him raise his voice like that. Kevin. Don't call me by my name. I've never thought of you as my father. When I first heard this, I too was shocked. I had never imagined that the branch manager was Mr. Anderson's son. Apparently, Mr. Anderson learned that his son was working as a dealer through Tony, who was his junior in high school. As a token of apology, Mr. Anderson became a client of the branch manager. However, the branch manager did not accept his apology and aggressively pursued many business deals, attempting to settle the past pain. Continuing this way, the branch manager evidently harbored a deep darkness. Believing this couldn't continue, Mr. Anderson sought my cooperation. I silently approached Mr. Anderson's car, feeling both their gazes on me. I stood next to Mr. Anderson's car and looked back at them. This car, it's the same model as yours, branch manager. Mr. Anderson's model was much older, but they were the same make. I can't imagine branch manager would choose the same car as Mr. Anderson by coincidence. There must be a connection between you two. You are father and son. What do you know? The branch manager's voice was the most forceful I had ever heard. Then, Mr. Anderson intervened. I was happy. His voice was gentle. I was happy to know you chose the same car as me. Those words seemed to soften the branch manager's expression. Mr. Anderson approached the test car. I'll buy this car from Nathan. But that's because I want to end our customer relationship with you, Kevin. As father and son, I want to drive this car with you. The branch manager turned away from Mr. Anderson, looking down. Do whatever you like. But I won't sit in the passenger seat. To the lonely-looking Mr. Anderson, the branch manager spoke up again, adding another layer to their conversation. I'll only sit in the driver's seat. At that, Mr. Anderson and I exchanged a smile. Then please, the two of you go on the test drive. I'll wait here. The branch manager glared at me again, but there seemed to be a hint of embarrassment in his face. I remembered. When I first came to this branch, I had talked about my father. It must have irritated the branch manager, complicating our relationship. Thinking it might have influenced him, I couldn't bring myself to resent him any further. It might take time for them to return to being father and son. But I was sure that one day, they definitely could. A year later, the branch manager suddenly announced he was leaving the company. Why are you quitting? He showed a childlike smile. I'm going to drive Route 66. Route 66, why? My dad wants to drive it. I have to take him while he's still healthy. I was surprised by his initiative but soon felt a surge of happiness. I'll take care of the store. Make sure you come back. Laughing, the branch manager playfully tousled my hair.
The mother-in-law said, "Shall we have dinner now?" and looked at the luxurious sushi boxes piled up in front of her. The premium sushi was arranged on the table, and everyone was excited. My daughter also seemed happy, and I thought that might be the only good thing about that day. However, the mother-in-law went to the kitchen and handed me canned soup. What is this? It's canned soup, can't you see? My name is Kelly, a 40-year-old housewife. I live happily with my husband, Ned, and our lovely daughter, Christina. Ned graduated from a university with a science major and joined a company that develops and manufactures laundry detergent, where he still works. This fall, Christina started middle school and is working hard in her studies and club activities. I myself work part-time at a local store, leading a very ordinary family life. However, even in these peaceful days, I had concerns. That is the poor relationship with my in-laws. Their home is just 10 minutes drive away, but we rarely visit unless there is a special reason. The reason is the terrible treatment we receive from them. Furthermore, there are concerns about the relationship between Ned's older brother, Wayne, and his family. Wayne, being 2 years older than Ned and the eldest son, has always seemed to take the lead since childhood. I think this is because the in-laws tended to dote on Wayne. However, Ned does not mind this and acknowledges that his brother is more capable than himself. Still, this delicate family relationship has continued since we got married, affecting both Christina and me. While Ned and I married after a long relationship, I had high hopes for his brother, thinking he must be a wonderful person as well. However, that was not the case. Including his parents, I faced a much harsher reality than I had imagined. Wayne seemed like someone who looked down on others based on superficial things. Wayne is married to Julia, a woman who was his classmate during university. Julia was born into a family that runs a construction company, originally wealthy and with flashy tastes. She collects branded items, which seemed to be a hobby shared with the in-laws, and she got along quite well with them. On the other hand, I come from an ordinary middle-class family and possess no striking characteristics. Ever since I first met the in-laws, I have always tried to be polite and keep a smile. However, the in-laws often criticized me by comparing me to Julia, the wife of their eldest son. "You are so plain, Kelly. Ned chose such a boring person. Compared to Julia, you lack flair, just too plain." I was laughed at as they said such things. Since Ned has no charm, he couldn't get a charming wife. Despite being the first meeting, such awful things were said. Ned did caution them, but they did not listen at all. The in-laws' favoritism towards the eldest son was deep-rooted, and Ned and I were exasperated by being second best. Even so, we managed to endure by blocking our ears. A year later, Julia and I gave birth to our children at around the same time. When we welcomed our daughter, Christina, Ned and I simply felt joy. However, the in-laws were different. They showered Christina with malicious words, comparing her to Julia's child and saying, "Kelly's child has such small eyes. Christina has large nostrils and a weird face." I couldn't stay silent and retorted, "Christina is still a baby. Please stop criticizing her appearance." But they dismissed it saying, "Jealousy isn't good." It seemed they thought I was jealous of Julia and Wayne. Despite my rebuttals, the in-laws were not serious about listening. I was shocked and wondered if Ned had been receiving such comparisons and criticisms all the time. Ned once said, "My parents love my brother so much, I'm used to this treatment though." Most of the harsh words from the in-laws were said when I was alone, so Ned might not be aware of how much I have been criticized. I thought about venting my frustrations to Ned, but I wanted to avoid worsening our marital relationship. So, I decided to calm down and contain my anger for the time being. At least, I thought it best to minimize our interactions with the in-laws as much as possible. As the children grew up, the gatherings at the in-laws' house would naturally decrease. However, the situation took an unexpected turn. As time passed and Christina became a middle school student, one day she came home feeling depressed. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Christina. What's wrong?" "Today at school, I met Mary." Mary is Wayne's daughter and Christina's cousin. Our home and Wayne's family's home are geographically close, and although they attended different elementary schools, they ended up in the same middle school district. Wayne's family tends to look down on our family. Wayne looks down on Ned, and his wife, Julia, often acts arrogantly. Influenced by this, Mary also boasted to Christina. At Grandma's house recently, they threw a party to celebrate my entrance to middle school, and I received a lot of gifts. Despite Christina also entering the same middle school, the in-laws did not even offer her congratulatory words. Why do Grandma and Grandpa dislike us? I was at a loss for words in response to her question. Although I had not explained the complex relationship with the in-laws in detail, Christina seemed to have sensed it somehow. Seeing Christina's sad face, I could no longer remain indifferent. I impulsively picked up my smartphone and called the in-laws' house. "Hello, this is Kelly." "Oh, if it isn't Kelly. It's been a while. What's wrong? Have you come to ask for money? Is the poor life too hard for you?" Hearing the mother-in-law's voice for the first time in a while, my irritation reached its peak. I heard about Mary's middle school entrance celebration party. Christina has also become a middle school student, but nothing was done for her. Don't you think that's a bit harsh? When I said this, the mother-in-law seemed surprised. Oh, I thought you didn't want to be involved with us anymore since you haven't contacted us recently. I responded. That's because you keep saying heartless things. I don't remember saying such things, but I did send a present for Christina. Really? Just then, a delivery arrived. Christina handled the delivery and received the package. I gestured for her to open it while I still had my smartphone pressed to my ear. When she opened the box, we were both shocked. Inside was a set of worn-out elementary school textbooks with Mary's name written in them. It seemed these were previously used by her. What is this all about? I heard from Mary that Christina's grades aren't very good. I wonder who she takes after in not being smart. Could it be Ned, or maybe you, Kelly? Maybe Christina should re-enroll in elementary school, don't you think? She laughed as she said this. Christina's grades weren't particularly bad, and it seemed Mary had maliciously twisted the story. And it appeared that these textbooks were probably intended to be thrown away. Probably because the mother-in-law's loud voice was heard through the phone, Christina was trembling with anger. You can mock me all you want, but please stop putting Christina through such horrible experiences, I said to the mother-in-law. However, the mother-in-law replied, Oh dear, how scary. Getting so angry will only give you more wrinkles. Julia is looking younger and more beautiful than ever, so you should take care of your appearance too. Feeling that further conversation was futile, I ended the call. My anger was uncontrollable, and although I had been silent so far because I didn't want to destroy our relationship, I had reached my limit. I told my husband everything when he returned from work. Can you believe what happened today? I've put up with your parents, but I can't tolerate them mocking Christina. When I conveyed this, Ned looked troubled and fell silent for a while. Then he slowly began to speak. I didn't know you and Christina were going through such things. I've been compared to my brother and told I'm no good since I was a kid. I thought that's just how parents are, and I've been avoiding the issue, but it's too much to let you two suffer like this. I'll speak up clearly. He promised to stand by us, and I felt relieved that he understood. However, I was also concerned that whatever Ned said now might not change anything. Unfortunately, my concerns became reality. Despite several attempts, interactions with the in-laws reached an impasse, and Ned hung his head helplessly. It was no use, huh? His words conveyed a sense of hopelessness about the situation ever improving. There's no need to force a relationship anymore. If anything happens, I'll handle it. Let's just cut ties. With Ned's words, I gratefully accepted his suggestion. At least this way, we could maintain our distance from them. It was sad about the middle school entrance celebration, but Christina also seemed to feel better staying away from the in-laws, and we decided to focus on our own family. However, some time later, we received news that the in-laws and Wayne's family were building a new house together. Julia's family, who are in construction, would be handling the build. We had already built our home through a local small construction company, and though it was modest, we were satisfied with it. Whatever house the in-laws built, it was none of our concern. But one day, while I was buying dinner ingredients at the supermarket, I unexpectedly ran into Julia. Oh. It's been a while. I was worried we hadn't met for so long. I was surprised when she approached me and said that. Normally, I avoided supermarkets in our living area to not meet Julia and deliberately used stores farther away. But that day, my regular store was closed, and I had to go to the nearby supermarket, where I unfortunately encountered her. Next month, our new house will be completed. We're having a housewarming party, and I really want you to come. I hesitated for a moment, but Julia held me back and insisted. The in-laws are just misunderstanding. I'll sort things out. Pushed by Julia's earnestness, I eventually nodded in agreement. That night, I told my family about what happened, and Ned said, "If you are going, I'll go too." And so, our daughter joined us, and eventually, all three of us decided to attend the housewarming. I was worried about meeting the in-laws, but with Julia's promise to mediate, we hoped the misunderstandings would be resolved. Perhaps deep down, we felt guilty about avoiding family. The following month, our family visited the newly built home of the in-laws. The in-laws and Wayne's family's new residence was a grand two-family house, standing out among the surrounding homes. When we rang the doorbell, Julia greeted us with a bright smile and led us to the living room, saying, "Welcome. Please have a seat," she said, and called out, "Mother, Kelly and her family have arrived." As the in-laws entered the room, they looked surprised to see us. "Oh, Kelly is here too?" I wasn't informed." Despite Julia's promise to talk to them, I was confused by this situation. At that moment, I saw Julia, Wayne, and Mary smirking, which gave me a bad feeling. The in-laws and Wayne's family, oblivious to our confusion, began to boast about their house. We really focused on the design of this part. Even the neighbors have praised it. Endless trivial stories like that continued. Moreover, they even made disparaging remarks about our home. "How do you even manage to live in that cramped house of yours? It's a shame for a detached house to be that small, isn't it?" The mother-in-law said this with a sneer. Despite Ned's admonishments, they continued to ignore him completely. And Julia, who was supposed to help us, either ignored us or sided with the in-laws, demeaning us. At this point, we realized we had been trapped, but it was too late as dinner time was approaching. "Shall we have dinner now?" she said, looking at the luxurious sushi boxes in front of her. The premium sushi was laid out on the table, and everyone was excited. My daughter also seemed happy, and I thought it might be the only good thing about coming there that day. However, the mother-in-law headed to the kitchen and handed me canned soup. What is this?" "It's canned soup, can't you see?" "This is fine for you, right, Kelly? There's no sushi for you." At her words, I was filled with disbelief and shock. Ned immediately objected, but the mother-in-law calmly said, "Because I hadn't heard that Kelly was coming. Unfortunately, there's only enough sushi for the family." It seems that to the mother-in-law, I am not considered part of the family. And Julia and Wayne seemed to be enjoying themselves, as if they had conspired with the in-laws. The words Julia had said about helping us were completely empty promises, and it seemed she had invited me to this house from the start with the intention of mocking us. Overwhelmed by the situation, I could only tremble without a voice. Then, my husband stood up. "We are leaving. There's no point in staying here. It's not enjoyable at all." I immediately agreed with his suggestion. Christina also stood up and grabbed her backpack. There was no longer any reason for us to stay in this house. I was wrong to trust Julia. As we were preparing to leave, Wayne came to the entrance and said to Ned, "You really are simple-minded. If you had ingratiated yourself with the parents a bit more, maybe you would have been treated a bit better." Ned coldly retorted to his sneering brother, "You're the worst, Wayne. What's fun about doing this?" And we left the house. When we got home, the warmth of our own house was a relief. No matter how small our home may seem, it is the place where we feel most secure. "Are you okay, Christina?" I asked, and Christina confidently answered, "I don't care about what those people say. Just then, I realized that Christina had left her smartphone at the in-laws' house. Just as I was about to contact them to retrieve it, an earthquake suddenly occurred. We hurriedly took shelter under the table and waited for the earthquake to subside. Fortunately, we were safe, but the news on TV informed us that our area was the epicenter, and we worried about the safety of the in-laws' house. As much as we disliked them, we would regret it if something had happened to the in-laws and Wayne's family without our knowing. Ned and I tried to contact the mother-in-law and Wayne, but no one answered the phone. Feeling anxious, we decided to visit the in-laws' house again. We were concerned about them, and anyway, we needed to retrieve Christina's smartphone. When we arrived at the in-laws' house, we were met with an unbelievable sight. The newly built two-story house had completely collapsed. Where a grand house once stood, now only scattered concrete debris remained. The furniture was crushed everywhere, and it was a complete disaster. The in-laws and Wayne's family were standing dazed in front of the collapsed house. Fortunately, they had all managed to evacuate safely outside. This relief was only momentary. Why did our house end up like this? The mother-in-law screamed, and the father-in-law silently supported her. I'm still paying the mortgage. Wayne lamented, holding his head, while Julia cried over her lost branded items and clothes, and Mary stood there dazed. Our house, like most in the area, had not suffered direct damage from the earthquake. Yet, why had their new house collapsed? This question arose. Then Wayne noticed us and said, "Your house must have collapsed in that earthquake too, right?" "No way. It's only your house that collapsed," Ned replied. Wayne was furious at this response. Huh? Why did my new house collapse while your house is fine? He seemed ready to lash out. Then, neighbors also gathered around, and the commotion grew. While most homes were safe from the earthquake, some older homes were damaged, and some people had to go to shelters. Mother-in-law complained, "I don't want to go to a shelter." But Ned said calmly, "What can you do? You've lost your home." Then the mother-in-law demanded, "Then let us stay at your house." That was out of the question. Ned firmly refused, saying, "Absolutely not." And I agreed with my husband. That's right. Besides, didn't you always ridicule our house as being small, plain, and boring? As I said this with a smile, the mother-in-law was at a loss for words. Then Julia, holding the mother-in-law's shoulder, said, "A shelter is probably better for you, right, Mother?" Even in such a situation, Julia's sarcastic comments pushed my irritation to its peak. I cannot allow people like you, whose hearts are so tainted, to step into our precious home. If people like you come, our home would be polluted. When I said this, Julia glared at me sharply. But it no longer mattered. I didn't care how bad our relationship would become. We have decided to cut ties with them. Later, Christina spotted Mary holding her smartphone and pointed out, "That's my phone you're holding, isn't it? You were probably trying to snoop through it, weren't you?" It seemed Mary was caught off guard and remained silent, but Christina swiftly retrieved her smartphone, and we left the in-laws and Wayne's family. It later became clear why the in-laws' house had collapsed. It appeared that the construction handled by Julia's family's company had involved cutting corners. Essential safety components had been replaced with cheaper materials and the number of bolts reduced, only doing the bare minimum required. After this fact came to light, Julia's parents were arrested under building codes, and their company went bankrupt. The in-laws and Wayne's family ended up staying in a shelter, but their past actions led to cold treatment from others around them. One day, Ned received a phone call informing him that the in-laws and Wayne's family had been hospitalized due to food poisoning from a meal provided at the shelter. Although they were recovering, their character remained unchanged, showing brazenness in demanding tastier food. Ned sarcastically suggested, "Maybe I should bring that?" And I agreed. It was a good idea from my husband. Hearing that the entire in-law family was in the same hospital room, we visited them. Upon spotting us, the mother-in-law dramatically reacted. "You finally came. Did you bring what we asked for?" She shouted this, but the father-in-law and Wayne's family looked exhausted from the house collapse and food poisoning. "It feels like we are cursed." I heard him mutter this. The mother-in-law demanded expensive shark fin soup and famous tarts, but I said, "I brought something better," and handed them something. "What is this?" "It's canned soup." This was a sarcastic response to her previous remark that people who are not family should be fine with canned soup. Ned, grinning, distributed canned soups to the weakened Wayne and father-in-law, saying, "It's a new flavor, enjoy." To Julia, I joked, "Canned soups fit for a celebrity," and gave her the same thing, while Christina passed a canned fruit to Mary. As we were about to leave, I firmly said to the father-in-law who had mentioned feeling cursed, "I think it's just desserts, you're only receiving back what you've put out." By clearly conveying that their current situation was a result of their own actions, we showed them the meaning of karma. In-laws and Wayne's family were dejected. They must have felt that they were receiving the consequences of their past scorn towards us. Hoping they would reflect even a little in the hospital room, we headed home. Ned mentioned with a laugh that he had never thought the bizarrely flavored canned soups he won at his company's year-end party bingo game would come in handy like this. After discharge, the in-laws and Wayne's family couldn't return to the shelter due to having caused trouble there too. The food poisoning was also their fault, as they had hoarded luxury meals and continued to eat leftovers long after. Their behavior at the shelter alienated them further, leading to their rejection from the community. Later, they were forced to live in a rundown apartment introduced by the authorities, where internal strife deepened as Wayne and Julia became overwhelmed with caregiving for the increasingly frail parents. Mary's school attendance and spirits were affected by the family environment. From this series of events, we were certain that cutting ties with that family early was the right decision. We now live a simple but extremely happy life free from strife and disdain. Our happiness isn't based on material wealth or appearances, but on the compassion and love within our family. As long as the in-laws and Wayne's family don't understand what true happiness is, their misfortune will likely continue. In our home, smiles abound today, and Ned's smile seems brighter than ever. I plan to continue cherishing my husband and daughter, ensuring we spend our days together happily as a family.